More on present values and future values. The formula we used for the future value says take the present value multiplied by 1 plus r with the sum raised to the power t. The formula to find the present value says take the future value and divide it by 1 plus r, the sum raised to the power t. The two formulas are very similar, right? Except for the future value we have a multiplication, for the present value we have a division. Otherwise the terms look very similar. You might even realize that mathematically it's the same thing. You can look at the future value formula and solve for PV in it by taking the future value and dividing by the future value factor. And that gives you the second formula on the slide. So really, we have been talking about one formula so far. It's known as the basic present value equation. So the present value version of it is the basic present value equation. The future value formula uses the future value factor, which is like a connecting link between the present value and the future value. If you instead want to go back from future value to present value, then we can multiply the future value by essentially 1 divided by the future value factor. And 1 divided by the future value factor is the present value factor. So the present value factor is the reciprocal of the future value factor. And it was already explained earlier that each factor has its own table at the end of the textbook, which you're free to use. Feel free to use if you like. In both formulas, R is the rate, interest rate, or discount rate, or rate of return. It all means the same thing. And both formulas assume compound interest, which includes simple interest and interest on interest. Then let's do another brief summary on how different parameters affect the future value and the present value. Time period. For a given interest rate, the longer the time period, the higher the future value, right? And if the money is growing faster, in other words, if the interest rate is higher, then your future value will be growing too. For the present value, everything is exactly backwards. For a given interest rate, the longer the time period, the lower the present value. Essentially, this is saying that if you need to wait longer to get some amount of money, then its value to you drops, for you drops. For a given time period, the higher the interest rate, the lower the present value. You can think of this as saying that if you want to have some amount of money in the future, at a certain point of time in the future, then you can afford to deposit less today if it will be growing faster,